The Carpenter and the Cradle, a History Weaver Adventure, Book 1, by Connie Worden, read by the author. Chapter 38. Fern wandered the house idly. She should be able to entertain herself without her mother finding chores or practicing for her to do, and she shouldn't be so reliant on her friends to keep her from boredom. She should make the best of her free time, she told herself. But the thoughts of her friends having adventures without her kept her mind from the book she'd tried to get into. It couldn't hold her attention. Christopher kept bugging her to play with him, and that wasn't helping either. She wasn't in the mood, and he could be a pain when he wanted something. She finally had to get away from his constant demands, leaving him to play on his own in his playroom. Tim Wu called her from his study. "Hey, Fern, that's the third time you've walked by my door. What's up? You seem preoccupied."
"I don't know, just restless, I guess."
"Well, you're making me nervous with all that pacing. Why don't you call up one of your friends if you have nothing better to do?"
"They're away, remember?"
"Oh, right, big hike, I forgot. Well, maybe go out for a bike ride or something, get some exercise."
"I suppose."
Fern shrugged. The idea seemed lackluster. But Tim was right, it was better than wearing holes in the carpet with her roaming around the house. Maybe she'd head back to the shed where Georgie had briefly stayed. They hadn't really searched the area around the shed. Maybe there would be something else to discover. A tiny spark of interest in her intended project lit her eyes up. The group of hikers/rescuers found the going down much easier and faster than the going up, but it wasn't fast enough. They were breathing almost as hard on the trip down as they had been when making their way up the mountain. Everyone felt the urgency. They needed to get back well before dark, if any rescue helicopters could be launched before nightfall. Where the nearest search and rescue helicopter could be accessed, even Paul didn't know. Hopefully no further away than Cherryton. Will had his phone with him, but there would be no cell phone reception until they were practically back at the bookshop. It was decided that Paul would make the call once they arrived home. It was still late afternoon when the anxious bunch burst through the door of the bookshop. Paul rushed through to grab the phone from the back room of the bookshop, and the rest listened nervously as he put the call through. They could hear his side of the conversation, but it didn't tell them anything they didn't already know.
"What'd they say?"
June barged in, barely giving her dad time to hang up. "They're sending a helicopter. It has to come from Lowen. That's a couple hours by car, but it won't take long by helicopter. We have to meet them at the airport in Cherryton. We should get there just about the same time the helicopter does. Then Will or Rex and I can go along to show them where James is. Hopefully we can find it from the air. Our 2 sets of eyes will be better for picking out the spot than just mine."
"Rex can go,"
Will offered unselfishly.
"Actually, you should go, Will. You have a better sense of direction. You're more observant, too."
The 2 brothers were bending over backwards to give the other one the chance, but one of them needed to step up and take it.
"Well, let's waste time arguing. One of you decide you're coming with me and let's get a move on,"
Paul said brusquely. Will shrugged, but his eyes lit up, and he followed Paul out the door and into the vehicle.
"We could all go," Rex said. "Not in the helicopter, but we could go and see them off. I'd kind of like to see the helicopter come in. I could go home and get our car and my mom and Hope if she wants to come. We were supposed to be having dinner at my Graham Brower's tonight with my Uncle Hal anyway. We could make a short detour to the Cherryton airport, I figure."
June didn't need to think twice about it. Besides, it would be a little more time with Will on the drive to Cherryton. Maybe she'd get a chance to say something to him instead of letting July monopolize him. She dashed out the door after her dad. She'd ask if she could ride with them. "Well, what do you think, girls?" April said to her other daughters. "Should we all pile in the van and go along and see the helicopter come in? I wouldn't mind seeing that myself." No one needed a second invitation. In spite of the seriousness of the situation, there was some excitement to be had from it. The first thing Fern noticed was that the door to the shed was open. Cautiously and quietly, she pulled her bike up to the shed and slid off the seat with one foot on the ground and the other still on the pedal, ready for a quick getaway if need be. She peered through the open doorway with only her head in the entrance, shielding her body behind the wall of the shed. Irrationally, this position gave her some sense of protection, as though she would somehow be less visible to anyone inside the shed if only her head was showing. After her eyes adjusted from the bright light afternoon outdoor light to the dimness of the shed's interior, she saw Georgie, sitting on the dusty floor, munching on potato chips from a bag in her hand and grinning at Fern. "Georgie!" Fern half screamed and dropped her bike, rushing into the shed. "You're okay. What are you doing back here?" "Got tired of being homeless and camping out in the damp underground," Georgie answered calmly. "I thought I'd come back and see if my old shelter was still available." "But you didn't say a word to us when you left. We thought you'd been taken. We thought your stepfather had got his hands on you." "Sorry about that. I thought it best I didn't seek out my friends after I saw my stepfather. I was taken. He did get his hands on me, kind of. Then I got away again." "How?" "Well, he found me here in the shed one day. I think he must have been watching June and July and saw them bringing me food here. Anyway, he found me and gave me the usual song and dance about how he was just concerned for me. Why had I run away when he'd been nothing but kind to me and always tried his best, blah, blah. And about how relationships between step-parents and step-kids were often challenging, but we could work through it, and he's my only guardian and I had no choice. I needed to come back home with him. Anyway, I decided to pretend to go with him willingly so that he was off his guard, and then I'd look for my chance to get away. We were getting into the car, but at the last minute, I turned and ran after he was already settled in the driver's seat. Gave me the head start I needed on him to get over the fence around the property and get out of sight. Then I headed back for the woods by the bookshop where there's lots of cover. So I've managed to stay hidden. I accidentally stumbled into the craziest hiding place, but I don't want to tell you where it is in case I need to use it again. I don't want any of my friends to know. The less they know, the less they can tell, without lying. Which none of you are any good at, I've noticed." "So why did you leave that spot?" Fern asked. "It got compromised too," Georgie said grimly. "And then I didn't dare look any of you up again. Too dangerous. He could track me again. Or possibly hurt my friends. Anyway, I thought maybe the coast was clear here again and I came back, at least for the night. I may move on again tomorrow. That's about it." "We wondered when we found the gum package. Did you leave it as a signal to us that your stepfather had taken you?" "Gum package? Did I drop a gum package here? No, it wasn't any kind of signal, other than a signal that I was pretty scared when my stepdad found me. Yeah, he did offer me a piece of gum. My favorite kind from back home. He had one piece left. I was trying to act normal, so I took the gum, and I guess I dropped the package without thinking about it. Not like me to litter." "Doesn't matter. I'm so glad you're okay. That's the main thing. We were so worried about you. The rest went hiking up Victoria's Peak looking for you." "Victoria's Peak? Looking for me?" "Yeah, we didn't know what else to try." "Why would anyone go hiking up Victoria's Peak, wherever that is, looking for me?" "Because of that sketch in your backpack?" "I'm not following." "That sketch of the strange symbols on some kind of strange object and kind of a map. The nurse described it to us, and Mr. Eagles thought the sketch of the map sounded like a place he knows. Up Victoria's Peak. Troisy Creek, I think he called it. The start of the Beaver River." "Oh, I didn't know about all that. I think he knows more about that sketch than I do." "Well, what was it doing in your backpack?" "I'd copied it off an artifact my stepfather has in his collection. He's kind of an amateur archaeologist of sorts, I guess. I'll tell you all I know about that, Fern. There's no reason not to. You know I'm not making things up. You know quite a lot already. The thing I copied the sketch from was some kind of ancient clay tablet my stepdad has in his collection. That was the thing that brought him to Scotland, to Georgie Green, where I'm from. St. George's Green, Scotland, I mean. That's where he met my mum. He moved there and married her. I think he married her just for the collection, though, to be honest. My real dad was a proper archaeologist and had quite a private collection of artifacts that museums weren't interested in, but that he thought were interesting, pieces that he wanted to investigate. Some of these came to him through other collectors who'd got their hands on them somehow, some through the black market, I imagine, but collectors who didn't necessarily recognize their significance or value. The clay tablet was part of my dad's collection. He'd had it as long as I could remember. I think it may have been the piece that got him interested in archaeology. After my dad died, my mum was going to auction off his pieces, and they were advertised in various publications. I just remember James showing up, especially interested in the clay tablet. Then, from there, he got to know my mum, and eventually she married him. He convinced her not to sell off my dad's collection, and after she died, it all passed to my stepdad. When they were first married, I liked him all right, but after my mum died and everything started to go so weird with him, and I started to realizing he was trying to kill me, I remembered that he'd come all the way to Scotland to check out the possibility of purchasing that tablet. I started to wonder if the tablet was the key to understanding why he was trying to kill me. I started to look into my dad's notes on it. My dad actually didn't buy that one. It was a family piece that had been handed down from one generation to the next. In my dad's notes, it mentioned this little place in Canada called Beaver Row as being connected to, or the area of origin of the artifact. My dad's mum was native Canadian and his dad was Scottish, who came to Canada for work, met his wife, and brought her back to Scotland. So the artifact came from my grandma on my dad's side. Anyway, after my mum died and my stepdad eventually moved us back to Penhurst, close to Beaver Row, I decided I had to find some answers, and I thought I could only find them in Beaver Row. But since getting here and the hit and run, I've been so busy just trying to stay alive and stay hidden, I haven't had a chance to figure out anything. I'm too scared to try talk to anyone who might know the history of the area and the meaning of the clay tablet, because they might know my stepdad and tell him where I am. So that's been kind of a dead end. Do you have any idea why your stepdad would want to kill you over this clay tablet, though? Georgie shrugged. The only idea that's come to me is that it's very old and very valuable, maybe important, to the history of the original people from this area or something, I mean. Like, in a rewriting history kind of way, revolutionary. The indigenous peoples from around here have no written history from what I've learned from the library and the little research I've been able to do. Wouldn't it be something if this clay tablet was from them? It's not exactly alphabet writing, but the symbols on it are a kind of a language. Pictographs, I think they're called. I think it might really be an important piece of history. And no doubt, my stepfather knows that. He recognized it as important when he saw the picture from the article in the magazine, advertising my dad's collection. And he wanted it very badly, enough to go all the way to Scotland and marry my mum for it. But doesn't he own it already, if your dad's collection passed through your mum to him? Fern interrupted. Yeah, so I thought, Georgie said slowly. But I started thinking that maybe somehow this one tablet is the exception from the collection. Like, maybe it actually belongs to me, because of the history of it being passed down from one generation to another in the family line. I'm my dad's only offspring. Maybe it really belongs to me, and James knows that, which is why I need to be out of the way in order for it to be really his. I don't know. I don't have any evidence for that yet, but it's the idea that occurred to me that I wanted to find out more about. I will tell you what's super interesting to me, Georgie continued after a brief pause, that Paul Eagles recognized the sketch from the tablet as actually being a kind of map of an actual location around here. If the tablet is as old as all that, I would have thought the landscape would have changed unrecognizably over the centuries, but I guess maybe it stayed relatively untouched. All I know is that the two mountain peaks and the squiggly lines starting between them, and splitting into 3 squiggly lines, made Mr. Eagles think of those 2 peaks he knows. The Troisy Creek splits into 3 different creeks that starts between the 2 peaks. I guess the saying, old as the hills, means maybe the hills and mountains stand for a long time. I guess maybe the spring has been around a long time too. Man, I wish I could have gone with them, Georgie said, smacking one hand on her knee for emphasis. Hey, not to change the subject, but have you been eating anything, other than that bag of chips, I mean? Fern asked her. Yeah, I get by, Georgie said. They don't keep the dumpster behind the grocery store locked during the day, so I watch for my opportunity and sneak into it when no one's around. There are always plenty of things past their shelf life that are unopened and actually totally fine for eating. It's not so bad. She shrugged her thin shoulders. Fern noticed just how thin those shoulders were. Georgie, that's terrible. Come with me. We're going somewhere to get you a proper meal, at least a hot meal. I can't go with you, Georgie said, shocked. What if I'm seen? Never mind, Fern said. You can too. We'll take all the back roads. We can double on my bike. You can ride behind me and keep your face hidden. You can just pop into the bathroom of the restaurant after you let me know what you want, and I'll order for you and get takeout. Then we could go somewhere quiet and talk, and you can eat." Georgie hesitated. "Come on," Fern coaxed. "I'm not taking no for an answer. It'll be fine." Reluctantly, Georgie got to her feet and followed Fern out into the lowering sunshine of the early summer evening. Co had very little to say to Limo on their long trudge back to the village. The downhill going was easier than the uphill coming, and they made much better time. If Limo noticed Co's silence, he chose not to mention it. Limo had very little to say as well, which wasn't unusual for him. He hadn't even scolded Co for not finding any food for them. This also wasn't unusual. A warrior would have been shamed to complain about his empty stomach, or to point out another warrior's shame in his failure to find food. Co's brain was too busy unraveling all the information it had just taken in to notice the silence. He couldn't deny the torment the information left him with. Half of him wanted it all to be true. Half of him wanted to go with Hab and Yosa and experience a whole new way of life. There was something so attractive in the way they spoke of Zhao to him. Could he possibly be welcomed in as one of their own? Even the son of Zhao? A brother to Yosa? But half of him reacted in fear to leaving behind all he'd ever known. The short conversation with Hab and Yosa had gone a long ways to opening his eyes to all that he had secretly known was wrong in the way of life he was accustomed to. But still, it was the way of life he was accustomed to. And then there was the teaching Yosa had given him on the meanings of the symbols to mull over. The more Co thought about them, the more the meanings opened up to him, and the more Co's mind opened up to things he had never thought about before. Yes, Co had plenty of thinking to do. There was a small band of men keeping watch at the outskirts of the village who greeted Limo and Co's return with relief. They'd apparently been waiting there all day. "Did you find the enemy, stranger?" Limo demanded of Goro, who was one of the little group. "No, the dogs lost the scent in the dense brush," Goro admitted. "After that, we'd noticed we'd become separated from you. There didn't seem any point in continuing. We ended up turning back." Limo only grunted. Co half expected Limo to announce another council fire to discuss what to do about the situation. Surely they couldn't just allow the stranger to flout their justice and escape as he had. But Limo was silent. Silent but busy thinking, Co could see. Goro broke into Limo's thought train by muttering into his ear. Co's sharp ears caught the words, "While we were out tracking the stranger, I believe it came to me where I've seen the man before." "Tell me," Limo commanded roughly. "It was a number of years ago. The stranger would have been a very young man. That's why I didn't know him right away. It was in the raid when... you know." Goro jerked his head in the direction of Co walking alongside, who was pretending not to watch or listen, but who was catching everything out of the corner of one eye and ear. "Yes," Limo barked out, "and?" "I believe him to be the son of the other, the headman." Goro's voice had dropped so low, Co couldn't be sure of the last words, but Limo's answer convinced him he had heard correctly. "Not the headman, the pretender, you mean. The ruling rights belong with the sacred Cradle, you know that." "Yes, of course, that's what I meant, but the headman at that time." Limo winced almost imperceptibly at Goro's untactful choice of words, but he had no rebuttal to their accuracy. "What do you say to it?" Goro persisted. "To what?" "To what I've told you. I have nothing to say at the moment." "Don't you think it calls for action? This was a direct attack in a way, or at least spying, certainly. There must be retaliation. They can't think they can get away with this kind of thing." Limo turned on Goro with such fire in his eyes that Goro quailed before the look and said no more. If Goro had been challenging Limo's leadership, testing him out for weakness, he himself was too weak to pursue it. That Co could see plainly. Limo's position was safe. For now. But Co had his own challenges to consider. Challenges to his own position. from himself. He was only dimly aware that in the back of his mind a plan was forming. He'd been toying with a notion all the time they'd been walking down from the mountain. But would he go through with it? He wasn't sure. He had yet to decide.